Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 308 for the 1st of Tishrei in a leap year. 1st of Tishrei, this is Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah. I am pre-recording this episode as I do for all of the Shabbos episodes and the holiday episodes. So I hope that you all have a sweet new year. I hope your Rosh Hashanah, if you're listening to this after Rosh Hashanah, that your Rosh Hashanah was amazing and great. If you're listening to this before Rosh Hashanah, then I bless you that your davening, your prayers should be answered, should go well, that you should have a really meaningful and good Rosh Hashanah. So today we are going to be addressing a common misconception that many, many people in the world have. What is that misconception? That misconception is that God and spirituality are one and the same. And this misconception leads to a lot of people looking at Judaism, looking at traditional Jewish life with a kind of questioning eye. In the sense that when we look at Judaism, when the Jewish religion, a practicing Jew, what does most of their life involve? It involves a lot of rituals, right? But these rituals are not really very spiritual in nature for the most part. Really, for the vast majority of what we do as Jews, it's very physical. So what do we do on Shabbos? I remember once as a kid, we actually, when I was a child, my family used to host foster children pretty often. We used to have these foster children that lived with us. And we had this one really, really cute foster child named Marshall who lived with us. He was about 3 years old. And he would come over, and he was only with us like once in a while. He wasn't there all the time, but he was often there on Shabbos. And one day we were kind of talking to Marshall and playing around with him. We said, "Marshall, it's Shabbos. What do we do on Shabbos?" And Marshall said, really enthusiastically, he said, "We eat." To him, that was Shabbos, because you know what? He wasn't really wrong. What do we do on Shabbos? A big portion of Shabbos is eating. That's a lot of what we do. There's 3 big meals that we eat on Shabbos. There's the 4th meal of Malava Malka that we eat after Shabbos. So that's a very, very big part of Shabbos. The idea of eating on Shabbos is so holy, in fact, that you don't even need to have the right intentions. Just eating during the week, you really are supposed to have like a very intentional consciousness while you're eating, that you're eating for the sake of God in order to elevate the food that you're eating. On Shabbos, so long as you're eating kosher food and so long as you say a blessing over that food that you're eating, that food automatically gets elevated. That food automatically serves its purpose. Other things in Judaism, tefillin, putting on tefillin, men put on tefillin, women light Shabbos candles. These are all physical things that we do. Even when we read from a Torah scroll, we need a physical parchment, and the physicality is very specific. Everything has, we have sukkahs coming up, right? There's like very specific physical dimensions to the sukkah that we put up. So if you equate God with spirituality, this might seem really, really strange, and it's very understandable to kind of not be so careful about the observance of the mitzvahs in such a specific way, because it's like, does God really care if there's another law that you're supposed to put on your right shoe before your left, and then you tie the left shoe and then you tie your right shoe. Does God really care about these things? Like, why are we doing this? And some people interpret it as that it's not really for God. It's actually for us. It's for us to connect to God and to feel a sense of godliness and to work on ourselves and ourselves, but God could care less. So that's half true. Yes, it is for us. These mitzvahs definitely do refine us as people and they connect us with God. But God definitely does care if we do mitzvahs. We know that this is a very big principle in Judaism. These mitzvahs are here. In Chassidus, we talk about this a lot, that when we do these mitzvahs, it's not just for our own sake. It's actually for God's sake. We do these mitzvahs to make God happy, to fulfill God's purpose here in the world. But how is that possible? If God is just spirituality, if God is this infinite being, what do these finite things have to do with God? So this is the exact question that we're going to answer today. And for context, we are going to be starting a new epistle, Epistle 20 in Iggeres HaKodesh. And in short, basically what this epistle is going to address is this idea of how God is not spirituality. He's not infinitude. Yes, he has an infinite component to him. He has a spiritual component to him, but finitude comes from God just as much as infinity comes from God. So while we tend to think of godliness as this very spiritual thing, and definitely there are many spiritual worlds, and there's a whole spiritual chain of descent that happens in the process of creating this physical world. So we're not kind of getting this from nowhere. There is such a thing as spirituality. That is a real thing, and that is something that can be helpful to tap into. But at the end of the day, physicality is just as much godliness as spirituality is, and that when it comes to creating physicality, there's actually a leap that happens where it's not this cause and effect kind of chain reaction thing that happens, but the physicality is created from God's essence himself, because it doesn't make sense that, like, truly, if God was spirituality, if God really was equivalent to spirituality, then there would be no connection between God and the physical world, because they're so vastly different, so different. But that's not the case. The truth is that God is both physicality and he is spirituality, and he's beyond both of those. He's the source of all of this. So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. And this is going to be a little bit like abstract maybe today, but it's pretty straightforward at the same time. So hopefully it won't be too out there. So here we go. So the Alter Rebbe begins with a very famous teaching that's found throughout the teachings of Chassidus, which says, Ihu v'chayu yichad, ihu v'garmu yichad bahun, which literally means he and his vitality, his life force, are one, and he and his organs, his vessels, are one. So another way to understand this is that God and his lights are one, and God and his vessels are one. So we're going to explain what this is in reference to. So the Alter Rebbe says, and this is in brackets, he says the meaning of this is that when we talk about the 10 spheres of Atzilus, so again, the 10 spheres, these 10 energies that are found in the world of Atzilus, which is the highest of all worlds, the world of emanation. When we say chayuhi, this life force kind of thing, this is a reference to God's lights. The garmuhi, can be translated as his causations. These are the vessels of the spheres. So all of the spheres have a light aspect to them, and they have a vessel aspect to them. And the Alter Rebbe says that all of it is godliness, whether we're talking about the light aspect of the spheres or the vessel aspect of the spheres, it's all godliness. And this is the case in the world of Atzilus, this highest world. However, notes the Alter Rebbe, this is not the same thing this is not the case in the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. In the Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, that's already when we start to get into the realm of creation, where there's something separate from God. We've, just as a kind of side note to give you guys like a visual with this, we've likened this in the past. If you wanted to, just a brief recap, if you want to think about the four worlds, one helpful way I find to think about the four worlds is in the concept of conception of a child, or the giving birth of a child. So the Atzilus could be thought of as the possibility of a child to come into existence, like sort of like the sperm and the egg that exist within the mother and father, but like there's no conception yet. Nothing has happened. They haven't gotten together. There's nothing happening. It's just like existing in potential within them. Once there is that moment of conception, that conception level, that's the level of Bria. So now you have something that is other than the mother and father. The level above that, the level of Atzilus, there is no difference between the child and the parents, right? They just exist in potential. Like if you're a woman and you have eggs within you, those eggs are not separate from you. They are you. They're one and the same with you, right? Versus then once there's a conception of a child, that's something aside from you. The Yetzirah, the next one below, that's the whole formation of the child within the womb, the 9 months of formation, of development of the child. And then the level of Asiya is the actual birth of the child. So that's kind of a helpful way that I can kind of help visualize this whole process that happens here. So again, going back to our discussion, when we're talking about the spheres and we're talking about the lights and the vessels of the spheres within the realm of Atzilus, they're one and the same with God. They are totally godliness, which is not the case once you get into the realms of Bria, Tzira, and Asiya, where they are something separate from God. Okay. So now the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says, we need to clearly understand, how is it that when we talk about God, who's God, we call another word that we use for God, another term for God is the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof literally means without end or infinity. So when we talk about God, how can we say that he's one with his vessels? So you could say, okay, like God is one with the light, because light is an infinite type of thing. You think of light, it's flowing, it's infinitude or whatever. But vessels, by definition, their whole thing is finitude. Their whole thing is limits. So how can we say that these vessels are one with God, one with the infinite? That doesn't make sense, right? Because vessels, as the Alter Rebbe says, are limited and finite, as it's stated in the Etz Chaim. So the Alter Rebbe says the way that we can understand this is the intention in saying that they're one is because we're saying that they are that they are godliness, meaning that they can create something from nothing, just like the Ein Sof, just like the truly infinite one, meaning truly God can create. So that's a very powerful statement. That's basically saying that these kalim, these vessels that are found in Atzilus, have the power to create, just like God has the power to create, because they are one with God. This isn't to say that God is defined by the kalim, just to make that clear, but it means that the kalim have within them this capacity to create something from nothing. And so to really specify, like, what is this creation something from nothing? So the Alter Rebbe says, he says, this seems strange, because if you actually look in the teachings of Kabbalah, in the teachings of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, and in the teachings of the Zohar and Parshas Bereshis, when it talks about how there's a sort of creative process happening, it does not talk about it in this something from nothing way, but it actually talks about it in this way of a hishtalshelus ila va'alul, which is a chain of descent, something for nothing, in this kind of evolutionary manner. So evolution is not something for nothing. Evolution is like one thing causes another, another thing causes another, and all that stuff. So there's like a natural chain of event that happens, right? So the Alter Rebbe says this natural train of event is happening within the spheros themselves. It's the spheros within the spheros that's happening. However, when we talk about the kalim, the vessels that we've been talking about, these are called bli ma in Sefer Yetzirah. They're called nothing, without anything. So meaning to say that they don't have a somethingness and they don't have a substance to them at all. And just like the infinite one, meaning God, that no thought can grasp him at all, as it says, and this is a quote from Shemot chapter 33, verse 23, Ufanai lo yirau, that my face shall not be seen. So meaning that we cannot, as we've spoken about many times, we cannot understand God. We can't see his face. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu, his prophecy and his understanding was on the supernal level of Netzach in the Zer Anpin. So we talked about this a little bit in the previous epistle, this idea of Moshe Rabbeinu's his limitation in terms of his prophecy, that he was able to only perceive God up till the level of which we talked about as corresponding to the externality, the superficial aspect of the spheros. So that's what Moshe was able to see. So it's really just to emphasize this idea that the true godliness, the inner aspect of godliness, is something that's beyond any comprehension at all. And now, just going back to this explanation of the Ila va'alul, the cause and effect type of thing, the way this works, this evolutionary chain of event that happens in the spiritual realms, is where we see that the effect is encompassed by the cause, right? And is nullified to it. So for example, the example he gives is like a ray of sunlight in the sun. So the sunlight is the effect, and the sun is the cause, right? And the sunlight is nullified to the sun where it's coming from. And this is explained, says the Alter Rebbe, in the Pardes of the Ramak. So thinking about this idea, thinking about this process, the system of evolution, the system of cause and effect, even if you had totally many contractions, you could never create something dense and coarse like the earth, like the ground, through many through this chain of event that's spiritual, like from abstract spiritual intellects, even of the angels. So meaning to say that no matter how dense spirituality becomes, no matter how many contractions it goes through, its spirituality by nature can never become physicality. So the best thing that can come about through this, says the Alter Rebbe, is that we can see that there's a spirit of an animal. So like we see that there's like in the celestial chariot, this is a face of a chariot that comes up a lot in Kabbalah. There's the face of the ox. There's like the faces of those things. So a way to kind of understand this in our terms is like, if you think about chocolate, if you think about a house, you could think about it in as many details as you want to, but that thinking is never going to bring about a physical house. The thinking is abstract. Spirituality is abstract. It has nothing to do with physicality. No matter, you could meditate on something for years on end and it's never going to become physical if there's not another component involved. And the Alter Rebbe says this is explained elsewhere at length, and see there. And so it's not clear where this would be this elsewhere, but I saw a note that the Rebbe wrote that this could be referring to the discourse Yavinu Levush Malchut that's found in Torah Or on page 90b. So if anybody wants to look that up, you can. And so then the Alter Rebbe concludes here, and he says that then there's this other, so we have this cause and effect process, this cause and effect system of creation, and then there's another system. This other system is called Yesh Mi'ayin, ex nihilo, and this is what we refer to as Bria in Lashon HaKodesh. This is what we refer to as creation. So true creation is not a cause and effect thing, but it's actually a something from nothing. There's a leap that happens. There's something different. There's a new type of entity that happens. So a little abstract, but we're going to continue along these lines tomorrow and explain this a little bit more and understand how this happens and what this is all about and how it is that God is not spiritual. God is not spirituality, at least not defined exclusively by spirituality, but physicality is just as much godliness as spirituality is. So stay tuned and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.